this is just an additional research, something that is a side interest of mine. So I want to tell you a little bit about the early development of the Chinese Empire, and I'm thinking that most of you have a limited view or limited knowledge about the beginning of the empire in China and Chinese legal influences, as far as you can say legal. So I first want to give you the origin of the two schools of thought that you can identify there that struggle with each other in the beginning of the first 100 years of the empire. So I'm talking about the period before that for a little bit. And then I want to tell you a story about a change of doctrine in the Chinese Empire between the Qin, the first dynasty, a very short dynasty that established the empire, and the Han dynasty, which is the dynasty that most closely is considered the founding fathers, or the basic of what the long-standing tradition until the end of the empire, they founded it. That's at least the idea. And Qin is very closely connected or thought of in connection with the legalism school. However, and Han is considered a Confucianist government. They established that Chinese are Confucianist scholars and the whole system is based on Confucianism. However, to quote the keynote speech from yesterday, it's not quite that simple, the story. There's actually a lot of influences and things that are kept, things that are changed between those two dynasties. So I want to go a little bit deeper than the standard picture that you might find in the first introduction that you read. Okay. First of all, Confucianism. I think most people of you have heard of Confucius, Kunzi, who is probably the earliest of the writers that we have to consider here. However, Confucianism today, or as we think of, is just as much influenced by Mengzi and Xunzi, who lived about 100 years later. And out of that huge philosophy that encompasses state as well as social concerns and something that you could call law concerns, we focus on a principle, Li, that some of you might have heard about in the talk of Gangluo, whoever was there. Li is a guiding principle, one of the foundations of Confucianism, and it can be translated as mores or as rituals, as a societal construct on how to behave rightly. It means that this moral conduct is dominating, and law is seen as only a necessary evil in most Confucianist theory. It's only considered to be necessary for when something goes wrong. And there's even a saying, the more laws a country has, the worse the government is. It means that they don't have control of the population, that the people are bad. And Li is also a principle that founds very much on the differentiation between people. Everybody is treated according to their status in society. Equalism is not considered right. It's supposed to be you as a person within the framework of especially your family, and your relationship also mean which rights and duties you have. Confucianism is also a very backward-looking ideal. It has the Li, the way social order is supposed to be. Confucius says that in the early Western Zhou dynasty, it was actually like that. It was a perfect society, and we should strive to re-establish that. However, you also have to say that during the Warring States period, where all these writers lived, Confucianism never actually gained a foothold in any state, was never actual state philosophy or used to enforce a country or laws. That's not the case for legalism, the other school that we want to focus on. The one that could be considered their founding father, or is mostly the first mentioned writer, is Shang Yang, the Lord of Shang, who wrote a book that, if anything, most closely resembles absolutism in the Western sense. It's a very law-based book, but law not in the sense of rule of law, but rule by law. So everything is considered a very equal, strict, punished laws. That means laws that are applicable to all parties within the state equally. However, they're only used for the good of the government. There's no consideration for the rights of the individual. So there's a very absolutistic idea behind what he writes. So he uses law, including and mostly criminal law with very harsh punishments and a strict control of the population to make a strong state, to establish a new kind of state. And it's also one of the differences to Confucianism is that he says that every age needs its own laws. There's different societies, so we need to not try to establish a perfect ideal from before, but do something that fits our society today. And the Lord of Shang, the actual living dates are not quite clear, but he was definitely appointed a minister in the state of Qin in 357 before Common Era. And this is mostly the point that people say Qin started to be a legalist state, a state that used the doctrine of legalism to strengthen its society and its law-related constructs. So they had a lot of published laws, administrative criminal laws mostly, that are used throughout the ages up to the founding of the empire. Because the Chinese empire was founded by the Qin state after they conquered all their neighbors in 221 BCE. And the first emperor used this legalist approach that especially his first minister, who later became the chancellor, Li Si, was very much in favor of. A very strict law approach with very focused written laws that are considered absolutely enforceable, that have to be obeyed, with still very harsh punishments and a sense of collective responsibility. So families of 5 are responsible for each other's crime, considering treason, for example. And a lot of emphasis is put on they have to denounce each other, otherwise they're also culpable for what the other families did. And they're still focused on war and agriculture. That's a very Chinese thought, that these are the only worthy occupations. And law is still used as a tool for effective centralized government. Well, now we come to the part that maybe it's not quite as clear-cut. Most of the information I used before are taken from 2 history books from the Chinese Empire, which are written about 100 or 300 years after the Qin era. They're written during the later Han period, which is a period that didn't like the Qin much. So some of the evidence given there might be considered biased, even though they're really good, well-written books. And we are very lucky that there's actually a huge archaeological digs that found over 300 bamboo stripes of Qin law. They might have looked like this, that we can compare to what the history books tell us about the time and the laws there. And this kind of relativates the idea of the Qin state as the most draconian state ever, that has a very harsh enforceable laws that are absolutely equal to everyone, no matter their rank. Because for one, there's not much evidence of the very draconian punishments. And even earlier writers suggest that the most public, well-known of the punishments, the burning of the books and the burning of the scholars alive, which are 2 of the very publicly decried terrible crimes that the Qin dynasty did, and on the advice of Li Si, the very legalist chancellor, that there might be either some problems with the translation, or they were not in scope as bad as it was supposed to look like from the Hanshu, from that book of Han. And the same considerations or same restrictions you can apply to the idea that actually is law absolutely applicable to all, yeah, there's some sources in the excavations that actually show that privileges were given to people with rank or considered more worthy, which is a very Confucianist idea. So even there, this law philosophy influenced the writing, the very non-law-based Confucianist thought influenced the writing and of the laws in the Qin dynasty. And, well, like I said, the Qin was a very short-lived dynasty. There's actually a story about how it ended, an anecdote about the rebellions, one of the rebellions that ended the Han Empire. Liu Bang, who later became the first Han emperor, was said to be leading a caravan, and he was late because there were natural disasters. And the laws in Qin were so strict that even if you're late because of natural disasters, you, as an official, are liable for the lateness and will be punished for it with corporal punishment, even death. So Liu Bang said, well, I might as well rebel and commit treason because I might as well be hanged for the sheep as the lamb. Why, if I go and be late and be considered a traitor, or if I actually be a traitor and maybe change something? So one can say that the traditional view is that one of the reasons the Qin failed is that they used legalism as their basis. So then we have a new empire, a new dynasty that takes about 5 years to establish. But then Liu Bang is named first Han emperor. And we actually have a consolidation period in that empire where there's a bunch of smaller states that develop and the emperors still have to seize power back. But even during that time, we see some changes. Especially the very harsh criminal code of the Qin was first completely abolished, and then, since that didn't quite work, it was reconsidered and taken in just the basics for robbery, thieves, murder, and added some more Han-like articles in the end. It is, however, a fact that most of the administrative laws were kept. Most of the things there weren't changed because the administration was taken mostly from the Qin time. So even though the Han publicly decried that they're completely different government and they're not taking anything and the Qin are really bad, a lot of the structures are kept and still used. And there's also, very luckily, archaeological findings confirming these close ties to that there's not much change on a lower level, on an everyday level of enforcement of laws to the Qin time. And the actual influence of Confucianism is very slow in coming. You can see that it takes a while for that to gain a statehold. And mostly, or in the beginning, it's often that it's when interpreting laws, when there's a case that's in doubt, it is considered valued to use a classical Confucianism literature as a guide. The way that maybe you can think about looking into the Bible or the Torah to interpret your current case. But this is often a philosophy book that they consider. If there's ever a real turning point where you can say, oh, Confucianism, after that it gets stronger, that might be not the change of dynasties, but actually the reign of Emperor Wu, about 60 years after the establishment of the Han dynasty. He integrated the Confucianist scholar into court that were before that, until about a generation before him, it was actually forbidden to have Confucianist learnings too much. And he accepted them in court, and at some point actually solely appointed them as advisors. It was considered, he was also the one who started the system of how officials are chosen in China until the end of the Qing time. So this is a very Confucianist-based system, and he started that. And he started the idea of Confucianism as the more important doctrine and legalism as something that is considered actually wrong or not taken into consideration. That doesn't mean they didn't have any laws anymore, even though the Confucianist writings consider law as something very doubtable. it is clear that for the writers of Confucianism at that time, that we need some kind of enforcement and we need some kind of structure. And they used the ideas from legalism and used laws, but it's called a Confucianization of laws, that laws are just an expression of the Li, of the guiding principles of mores and society. So law is not enforceable because it's a law, but only if it belongs to the right societal order. And later on, there's actually a lot of laws that can only be considered an expression of Confucianist thoughts. And it takes quite a while until Confucianism becomes orthodox, becomes the actual state ideology in the Chinese Empire. And even then, we still have a lot of basic laws, framework, the way the state is set up, that is actually legalist-based, taken from the Qin. Yes, that's the Emperor Wu. So in conclusion, we have a big difference between legalists and Confucianists. And here we focus mostly on the difference how Li and law are connected. Li, the social mores, and law, whether they are, law is a tool or, of itself, or is just an expression and enforcement of the social mores. And it takes actually a lot longer than most people assume for Confucianism to become a state ideology, to be considered the one ideology or theory in China. It can probably trace back to the middle of the Tang Dynasty, so a lot longer than you would consider at first. And even then, from the structures, the viewpoints, the administration, a lot is actually still legalist. So, thank you for your attention.